we'll continue to study the words of my perfect teacher. This time I am teaching the text fairly slowly to ensure that you put the teachings into practice. Many people have practiced well and gained valuable experience, and I encourage you to keep up the good work. Of course, ngondro is different from other tantric practices such as tamo, fire puja, sock offering, and so forth, which many people enjoy engaging in. These tantric practices can indeed bring benefits if the practitioners have already reached the generation stage and completion stage, but I suggest beginning practitioners first complete ngondro practice. When you first started ngondro, I repeatedly stressed the importance of practicing the common preliminaries well. Otherwise, it will be difficult to have a good practice with the uncommon preliminaries. If you don't practice the uncommon preliminaries effectively, the more profound tantric states will not arise within you. Therefore, many Tibetan sages and realized masters have diligently practiced the common preliminaries. One of my former school classmates, who also took ordination and is now a Khenpo, currently pursues Dharma in a monastery located in Qinghai province. He recently came to stay with me for a few days. During our conversation, he talked about a lama from his monastery named Tsultrim from Golok, Qinghai. This lama is in his 60s and has completed 16 rounds of uncommon ngondro practices. The last round he completed was when he was 60 years old. Lama Tsultrim mentioned that it had never been difficult for him to practice ngondro, except that doing prostrations at 60 years old was slightly challenging. He has extremely strong confidence in both the common and uncommon preliminaries, and once every few years, he would repeat the ngondro practices. He remained committed to practicing ngondro and never stopped, even during the Cultural Revolution. Lama Tsultrim upholds pure precepts. He became a monk at a very young age. Despite the turmoil in the Tibetan region during the chaotic period, he never disrobed. Instead, he continued to practice the common and uncommon preliminaries repeatedly in a covert manner. With this perseverance, he successfully completed 16 rounds of ngondro. My classmate stayed at the monastery for quite a long time, so he knows many of Lama Tsultrim's life stories. I genuinely rejoiced upon hearing them. There are many such Tibetan practitioners, but we are often unaware of their existence. Therefore, we should strive to complete and perfect both the common and uncommon preliminaries. We shouldn't merely talk about ngondro or focus solely on the number of repetitions and practical formalities. Instead, we should cultivate true feeling and conviction for each practice. Only in this way can the practice truly impact us. As a result, we will remain motivated to engage in it. Of course, during this process, some Dharma students may give up midway, and various challenges may arise. However, I still hope that everyone, myself included, will persist in the practice. Why do I join prostration practice with you every day? It's because this opportunity is extremely rare and precious, and I do not want to let it slip away with various excuses. Nowadays, many people only talk about the words of my perfect teacher, while only a few actually put the teachings into practice. This is not good. No matter who you are, you must place great importance on ngondro practice. As for me, I haven't completed ngondro many times, only once. Back when I was just a novice monk, I focused solely on the number of repetitions and did not engage in many meditations on the common preliminaries. However, this time, before I give teachings each day, I carefully reflect on the content, which helps me generate very strong feelings about the common preliminaries. For example, when teaching the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages, I truly feel in my heart that the most important thing is to practice the Dharma with this human form, above all else. When teaching the impermanence of life, I strongly believe that every instruction in the text is undeniably true. Although I may not express myself well, and I may not be able to articulate everything in my mind, I do generate strong feelings while preparing for the teachings. I also have sincere and pure faith in the lineage masters, the Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas. I hope that by practicing ngondro this time, you will experience a significant transformation in your life and reap great benefits in this life and in many lives to come. This is my aspiration for initiating the current ngondro group practice. Therefore, we should always engage in self-reflection during the practice, thinking, in this diverse society, different circumstances may arise one after another. However, the utmost priority must be given to my ngondro practice. Other matters can be temporarily set aside. In the previous section, we learned that holy beings, including Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and eminent masters, cannot escape death. Today we'll study the fact that beings with power, wealth, and status also die, and that none of them live forever. The impermanence of those in positions of power, even the celestial beings and rishis who can live for countless eons and possess perfect virtues and merits, cannot escape death. Once, during a Buddhist ceremony, a Japanese Dharma friend told me, people living in Japan also need the Dharma because we Japanese also have to deal with suffering, including birth, old age, sickness, and death. His words resonated deeply with me. In fact, everyone in the world needs the Dharma. Why is this? Take me, for example. I don't need to take first and second grade courses in elementary school because I have already graduated. I don't need to attend medical school because I don't practice medicine. However, I do need the Dharma as I must confront birth, old age, sickness, and death. Consider this. Every patient must take medicine for treatment. Similarly, every being, whether Japanese, Chinese, American, a celestial being, or a hell being, must rely on the Dharma to be freed from the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death in samsara. Therefore, I sincerely hope the Dharma spreads to every corner of the world and nourishes the hearts of all. Let's reflect on this. Does the president of a country need the Dharma? Definitely. Do beggars in the street need the Dharma? Absolutely. Because everyone faces birth, old age, sickness, and death. And everyone risks suffering if they fall into a lower realm in their next life. Thus, we conclude that there is not a single being who does not need the Dharma. Rather, some beings are temporarily unwilling or unable to accept it. For example, an animal certainly needs the Dharma to uproot its strong afflictions. However, it cannot understand the teachings, even if we try to impose them directly on the creature. Let's get back to the text. Those who've studied the treasury of Abhidharma know this. Worldly lords such as Brahma, Indra, Vishnu, Ishvara, and other great gods are said to have lifespans of many kalpas. Their majestic forms are measured in leagues or earshots, and they possess a power and resplendence that outshine the sun and moon. Yet they too are not exempt from death. Take Indra, for example. Here's the story from the Dhammapada. Long ago, Indra realized through his clairvoyance that he was about to die and be reborn into a potter's family as a donkey. As his body began to deteriorate, he became so worried that he thought of the Buddha, the only protector in the three worlds. Thus, he sought refuge and protection from the Buddha. The Buddha was meditating in a stone house at Gijhakuta, Vulture Peak, immersed in a deep meditative state. Upon seeing the Buddha, Indra prostrated and wholeheartedly took refuge in the three jewels 3 times. His life ended before he could rise, and he then entered the womb of the potter's donkey. At that moment, the donkey broke free from the ropes that bound her, dashed away, and destroyed many pots. In his anger, the potter struck the donkey, harming her womb. As a result, Indra regained his life and returned to his role as a celestial god. The Buddha emerged from his samadhi and praised Indra. "Excellent, Indra. Your negative actions were purified when you took refuge in the 3 jewels at the end of your life, and you will no longer suffer." The Buddha also imparted the teaching of impermanence to Indra. Hearing this, Indra attained the Sotapanna stage, stream entrant. Thus, even the celestial gods cannot escape death. Some practitioners of Taoism aspire to achieve immortality and eternal life. In fact, what they truly desire is a significantly prolonged lifespan, which does not necessarily mean they will never die. As the Treasury of Quality says, even Brahma, Indra, Mahesvara, and the universal monarchs cannot escape the Lord of Death. How many of you listening to this teaching will still be in this world 100 years from now? Take a moment to reflect on this. In fact, death is not far away from us. Although we may not like the idea of death, we cannot stop it, because the nature of everything is impermanence. Furthermore, not even divine or human rishis with the 5 kinds of clairvoyance and the power to roam freely through the sky can escape death. The Letter of Consolation says, "Great rishis with their 5-fold powers can travel far and wide in the skies, yet they cannot reach the realm of deathlessness." Here's a story from the Dhammapada. When the Buddha was living in Rajgir, there were 4 Brahmin brothers who had attained the 5 kinds of clairvoyance. They could turn the sky and the earth upside down, dim the sun and the moon, move mountains, and overturn the oceans. There seemed to be nothing they were incapable of doing. One day, through their clairvoyance, they realized they would die 7 days later, so they gathered to discuss how to escape death. One brother said, "I'll dive into the ocean. I will neither surface nor sink to the bottom. I will float in the middle, so the demon of death won't know where I am." Another brother said, "I will enter Mount Meru and seal the entrance, leaving no opening, so the demon of death won't know where I am." A third brother said, "I will hide myself in midair, so the demon of death won't know where I am." The last brother said, "I will conceal myself in a noisy and crowded bazaar, allowing the demon of death to randomly choose anyone. He doesn't necessarily need to find me." After their discussion, they hid according to their plans. 7 days later, the brother who hid in midair fell to the ground like a ripe fruit from a tree and died. The brother who hid inside Mount Meru died. The brother who hid in the ocean died and was devoured by fish and turtles. And the brother who hid in the bazaar died in the crowd. Upon hearing their stories, the Buddha told the Sangha, "These 4 individuals were so ignorant that they didn't understand the truth of life. Is there anyone who has truly escaped death? Sentient beings desire to live forever, but they simply cannot. Therefore, once a person reaches the end of their lifespan, even if they still wish to live and seek help from everyone, including doctors, statesmen, and even Buddha Shakyamuni, no one can do anything about it." As recorded in some historical accounts, when King Varudaka attacked and annihilated the tribe of Shakyas to demonstrate the incredible and unfailing law of karma, Buddha Shakyamuni hid several Shakyan children. 2 children were placed on the moon, 2 in the ocean, and 2 in an alms bowl. When the massacre was over, all 6 children had already died of natural causes, although they were not harmed by Varudaka. Therefore, when our life is to end, wherever we live or flee, death will surely arrive. Even Buddha Shakyamuni cannot change this karmic result, let alone worldly doctors. We must carefully contemplate this text during our practice. Although the literal meaning is easy to understand, many people rarely associate impermanence with themselves due to their ineffective practice. As a result, they feel great pain when they have to face their own death or the death of a loved one. If people have a conviction about impermanence, whatever happens, they will feel it is normal. They can then confront it with peace and calmness, so they won't experience excruciating suffering. Therefore, those who have studied Mahayana Buddhism, and especially those who have practiced impermanence, are brave in the face of death. In contrast, worldly individuals become completely lost and suffer immensely at the moment of death, regardless of how knowledgeable or intelligent they are. We have just learned that gods and rishis could not escape death. Now, let's examine powerful figures in the human realm. According to historical accounts, such as Taranatha's History of Buddhism in India, here in our human world, there have been universal emperors who possessed immense wealth and power and held the highest position. In the Holy Land of India, starting with Mahasamata, innumerable emperors ruled over the entire Jambudvipa. According to the Red Annals, Mahasamata was the first monarch of the world. At the very beginning, humans were hardly attached to the concepts of I, me, or mine, so they shared their wealth, and their bodies emanated halos of light. As time passed, people's merit gradually diminished, leading to differences in gender and the need to distribute wealth, which resulted in conflicts. In response, people held discussions and eventually elected a king with the title Mahasamata, the Great Elect, one chosen by the people. The first king of the world was selected through a democratic election. Thus, the democratic elections of our modern era can be traced back to the time of Mahasamata. Subsequently, the king's throne was passed down to his descendants until the time of Suddhodana, the father of the historical Buddha. Later, the 3 Palas, the 37 Chandras, and many other rich and powerful kings reigned in both eastern and western India. Afterwards, with the Indian monarchy abolished, humanitarians such as Mahatma Gandhi assumed leadership in India. But now, all those in positions of power can only be found in the glorious history, and none of them are alive today. Hence, from the history of Indian emperors, we can easily understand the principle of impermanence. In the snowy land of Tibet, the first king, Natri Senko, a descendant of Mahasamata, was an emanation of the Bodhisattva Nirvaranavascambin. Natri Senpo was born in what is now India, with hands and feet webbed like a swan's. The locals believe the child must be of non-human origin, so he was banished. Driven by his karma, he wandered on foot and eventually ended up in Tibet. There, he encountered some shepherds. When they inquired about his origins and identity, he pointed up at the sky. The shepherds assumed he must be a god who had descended from the heavens and appointed him their chief. They built him a throne from earth and stones that they carried on their shoulders, and he came to be known as Natri Senpo, which means king of the throne on the shoulders. Starting from Natri Senpo, there reigned 7 heavenly kings called Tri, 6 earthly kings called Lek, 8 middle kings called De, 5 linking kings called Sen, and 13 generations of the fortunate dynasty, including the 5 of the extremely fortunate dynasty, but now they no longer exist. When I was studying at the Normal School of Garzay, I developed a strong interest in the history of Tibet. I remember that while my teachers were lecturing on Chinese or music, I would read history books at my desk and begin memorizing the names of the kings. Why are the kings referred to as the 7 heavenly kings called Tri? This is because they ascended to the sky when their lifespans ended, leaving no trace of their physical bodies, similar to the attainment of the rainbow body. As a result, some Tibetans believed that the kings had ascended to the heavenly realms. Therefore, it has been suggested by some that Tibetans originally believed in God. Not long ago, an American visited Beijing. While on the subway, He asked passengers if they believed in God, and some responded that there was no God at all. This person became very angry, exclaiming, "How can you not believe in God? What kind of person are you? You are as foolish as an animal." Why are the 6 earthly kings called Lek? This is because their tombs were constructed between a stone hill and a grassy hill, suggesting the key term earthly. Why are the 8 middle kings called De? This is because their tombs were built in the middle of rivers, indicating the key term middle. The tombs of the 5 linking kings called Sen were situated in locations that connected them to the country. The 13 generations of the Fortunate Dynasty began with Trinian Songtsen, the direct descendant of Lotha Thorin Yensen. The Dharma first emerged in Tibet during the reign of Lotha Thorin Yensen, when the sutra designed like a jeweled chest and the Sutra of 100 Invocations and Prostrations, along with a cubit-high crystal stupa, fell onto the palace roof. It was prophesied that 5 generations later, during the reign of Songtsen Gampo, someone would grasp the meaning of the sutras. This marks the beginning of Buddhism in Tibet. During the reign of 13 kings from La Tothori Nensen to Ralpakan, Buddhism thrived in Tibet. For example, Songtsen Gampo married 2 princesses who brought numerous representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, including statues of Buddha Shakyamuni. Meanwhile, Thonmi Sambodha invented and introduced the Tibetan script. Additionally, Minister Gartensen, an emanation of Vajrapani, visited many countries, thereby enhancing diplomatic relations. For these reasons, these leaders are referred to as the 13 generations of the Fortunate Dynasty. The later period of the 13 generations of the Fortunate Dynasty was marked by the 5 extremely fortunate dynasty, spanning from Trisong Detsen to Ralpakan. For example, King Trisong Detsen invited 108 pandits to Tibet, including Padmasambhava and Shantarakshita, organized the translation of the Tripitaka, and oversaw the construction of temples, including the first temple in Tibet, Samye Monastery. Consequently, Buddhism flourished during this time. King Ralpakan also held Buddhism in high regard. He often divided his long hair into 2 strands and spread it on the ground, asking the tantric yogis to step on one side and the monks on the other. In addition, he made significant contributions to Buddhism. The great achievements of these kings were also reflected in the extent of their territories. According to historical accounts in red annals, blue annals, and white annals, during his lifetime, the Dharma Ting Songtsen Gampo, an emanation of Avalokiteshvara, relied on his magical army to conquer vast territories, extending from Nepal in the south to China in the north. Songtsen Gampo indeed had a remarkable reign, but the territorial issue has always been quite sensitive, which is not our topic of discussion. Here, we are primarily examining it from the perspective of impermanence. King Trisong Detsen also ruled 2/3 of Jambudvipa. Those historical accounts are quite reliable. In particular, Gendun Chapel's research is esteemed for its accuracy. Although Gendun Chapel didn't live long, he passed away in his 50s. His research was authoritative and is recognized internationally. During the reign of Ralpakan, an iron pillar was erected on the banks of the Ganges, marking the boundary between India and Tibet. Gendun Chofel covered this event in Guide to Sacred Places in India. He also noted in his travelogue Grains of Gold, Tales of a Cosmopolitan Traveler, that Dharmasvaman, a Tibetan monk and pilgrim who traveled to India in the 13th century, spent one night at the Iron Pillar during his journey and the next day crossed the Ganges to arrive in India. Therefore, it appears that the border between India and Tibet at that time was along the Ganges. Later, when the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche visited India with us, we inquired about the location of the Iron Pillar, but the Ganges is so extensive that we were unable to find it. Tibet exercised power in many regions of India, China, Gesar, Tajikistan, today's Iran, and other countries. At the New Year banquets, envoys from all those countries were required to spend one day in Lhasa for the ceremony of offering gifts and paying tribute. In historical accounts of how eminent masters of Tibetan Buddhism propagated the Dharma, one can find information about the territory of Tibet and its relationship with neighboring countries during the reign of Ralkha Khan. Such was Tibet's power in the past. However, it did not last. Apart from the historical accounts, nothing is left. It is the same for the history of the Han area of China. There were many powerful kings and emperors of Chinese dynasties, including Xia, Shang, Zhou, Qin, the Three Kingdoms, Jin, the northern and southern periods, Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing. Many of these rulers had remarkable capacities, such as Emperor Qing Shi Huang, Emperor Wu of Han, Emperor Taizong of Tang, Emperor Taizu of Song, and Emperor Kangxi of Qing, who are regarded as some of the greatest leaders. Nevertheless, none of them are still alive, which also reflects the principle of impermanence. We've also learned about history, geography, astronomy, and other areas of knowledge, which help us reflect on impermanence. For example, physicists such as Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton are no longer alive. Also gone are paper inventor Cai Lun, astronomer Zhang Heng, mathematician Zhu Chengji, geographer Li Daoyuan, agronomist Jia Cixie, and others. These individuals made their mark on the world, but now they are all gone. We can only learn about them from the historical accounts. Putting aside these big names, if we examine the people around us, we can see what has changed over the years. In my hometown, when someone refers to a family, they typically use the father's name. Therefore, when I was a child, families were addressed under the names of my father's generation. A few years ago, it was under the names of my generation. Now, when I visit my village, the names of my generation have been replaced by those of the younger generation. The new generation replaces the old, much like flowers blossoming and withering. Impermanence is evident before our eyes. However, although we constantly experience the changes of seasons and the transition between days and nights, many of us still cling to the idea of permanence and fail to understand the truth of impermanence. Therefore, we must have conviction about impermanence. As many great Kadampa masters have said, if one practices impermanence well, all the other practices will go well. If we contemplate the above reasoning, compared to the great splendors of the past, the houses, possessions, relatives, and power we now have, which we consider so superior, are as fragile as a beehive. What permanence or stability can there be in such worldly pleasures? Someone builds a cabin thinking, "What a nice house I have," and decorates the interior with thankas. This person finishes furnishing the house and feels very happy, believing they are now living in a patala. However, what they have built and furnished is not very solid. It's like bees are happy when they finish building a beehive. However, it's hard to predict what will happen to it in winter. Therefore, the Buddha says, "Alas, all conditioned things are impermanent in nature. Once born, death inevitably follows. A wise person should be well aware of this." Generally speaking, ordinary people have a particularly weak awareness of impermanence. Only those with a virtuous root cultivated from previous lives may naturally possess a sense of impermanence. Last night I was not feeling well and couldn't sleep, so I began to read the biographies of eminent masters of the Song dynasty. One of the masters was Chan Master Jishuan, who lived to be 73 and greatly contributed to Chinese Buddhism. When he was still a child, he already had a profound insight into impermanence. At the age of 5, his grandfather asked him to write a poem in praise of flowers, and his work was, When the flowers bloom, the tree is all red. When the flowers wither, the branches become empty. The only flower that still remains will surely be gone with the wind by tomorrow. The poem implies that while we are alive in this world, everything may appear thriving on the surface. But when death arrives, everyone has to die. And even if 1 or 2 people remain in this world, they cannot live forever. Sooner or later, they will also die. Here is a story about another Chan master, Lingyu, who passed into parinirvana at the age of 88. At that time, Emperor Wen of the Sui dynasty held him in high regard and invited him several times to become a national master for the imperial court. However, Master Lingyu always found an excuse to decline. Eventually, the emperor realized he could not persuade the master, so he made generous material offerings to him and also built a temple in the mountains in his honor. Master Lingyu devoted his entire life to propagating the Dharma, and when he was about to leave this world, he wrote a poem that says, "Today I sit in a hall with a high ceiling. Tomorrow I'll lie down beneath the long thorns. This life is already over. Who knows what my next life will be?" A few days after composing this poem, the master passed away. If we can deeply engrave the concept of impermanence into our minds as these eminent masters did, our practice will become easier. These great masters devoted their entire lives to the Dharma. They didn't pursue fame and wealth, and they practiced earnestly throughout their lives. Unfortunately, we are not like this. Many of us remain very attached to worldly concerns. We may claim that we want to practice the Dharma, but in reality, we struggle to free ourselves from various temptations. Hence, when reading biographies of great masters of Chinese Buddhism, we cannot help but feel embarrassed. In the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism, Dudjom Rinpoche also covered the life stories of many Tirthans, tantric yogis, and other practitioners in Tibet. You may reflect on how they spent their lives and consider how we spend our own. By comparison, we'll realize that contemporary practitioners, whether lay practitioners or monastics, cannot be compared to our predecessors. Master Chengguan, 738 to 839, also known as the National Master of Qingliang, made 10 aspirations. The following is a paraphrase of his aspirations. 1. Always stay in a 10 square meter room and keep no other possessions except my 3 Dharma robes and alms bowl. 2. Abandon fame and wealth as one would throw away snot. 3. Do not look at women. 4. Do not socialize with worldly people. 5. Recite the Lotus Sutra regularly. 6. Frequently read classical texts of Mahayana Buddhism and greatly help others. 7. Teach the Flower Garland Sutra regularly. 8. Never lie down during the day or night for my entire life. 9. Never deceive beings for the sake of gaining fame. 10. Never withdraw my compassion and bodhicitta. I assessed myself against this list. I cannot never lie down during the day or night. I cannot have no other possessions except my 3 robes and alms bowls. I cannot abandon fame and wealth as one would throw away snot. Compared to our predecessors, we possess less mental strength, which is truly embarrassing. Nevertheless, we should still have confidence in ourselves and strive to study and practice the Dharma. We must firmly believe that aside from practicing Dharma and benefiting beings, nothing else, including mundane pleasures, is meaningful in this world. Therefore, we should aspire to do our utmost to benefit sentient beings through the Dharma. When we have time, we should practice the Dharma, particularly focusing on impermanence. Reflect on and meditate deeply and ask yourself how you could have believed those things would last forever and never change. Gendon Chopal says in his instructions to the practice, this impermanent body holds no substantial meaning. so it should be used to diligently practice the extraordinary Dharma. This instruction is crucial for every practitioner. We should always pray to the Guru and the Three Jewels, so that the state of impermanence will soon arise in our minds. If we do so, neither will we be interested in worldly concerns, nor will we procrastinate about studying and practicing the Dharma. A lay practitioner often receives calls from his Vajra friends who say to him, "Can you join in the teaching? Don't give up your studies." If this layperson is motivated by their understanding of impermanence, they will recognize the futility of worldly concerns and prioritize the Dharma. Consequently, they will willingly attend the teachings. Conversely, if this layperson lacks an effective practice regarding impermanence, he will be like a mischievous child who requires constant supervision. Despite others' best efforts, it will remain challenging to guide him onto the right path. Only when he truly understands impermanence can he begin to practice independently. Only then will his practice become effective.